everyone. Welcome back to the Family Dinner Podcast. Happy to have you here. We are here today to discuss a very interesting topic, lighthearted topic, as per usual, religion. And just kind of the different dynamics when you're in a family that has differing opinions, and we just kind of wanted to talk about our experience growing up in the LDS religion and each of our individual experiences, as well as our relationship together and the interconnectedness of religion and relationship. And yeah, I wanted to first start off with my mom. Because I feel like her relationship with the religion is very important because it obviously affected all of us. So, Mom, could you just give kind of a overview of like what your experience was growing up in religion, like any significant memories that you have, maybe positive, negative impacts you believe, and just kind of a general timeline of where you were at as a young person and how that evolved, and kind of a little bit of where you're at now. And then I want to go from there and kind of talk to each one of us about that as well.
All right. Thanks, Liz. Yeah, so I grew up in the LDS religion. Most of us are in Utah. And, well, I guess not even most of us, half of us. So Utah, as you know, is well known for the Mormon religion, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And in my growing up years, my parents were members. My posterity, of course, going forward, a lot of members. And then my ancestry, I had pioneer ancestry on both sides of the family. Not my father's father, my paternal grandfather, but everyone else had ancestry, with pioneers. So definitely in the DNA. And my dad was not active in the religion until I was about 15. So he smoked and was quite vocal about how he felt about people judging him. And for a lot of those years, we lived in Evanston, Wyoming, where he grew up, and he felt judged and criticized for his lifestyle. And he would sometimes say, some of these people just live their religion on Sunday, and I try to be a good person every day, of course, trying to, justify he still had goodness, even though, maybe his lifestyle choices with drinking and smoking were not in line with the religion. And
something interesting about that, Mom. You maybe were going to talk about this, but one thing I never put together about that is that your sisters grew up completely with your dad never going to church, which I think will be relevant to our discussion later, because all of them, well, I guess not all of them, but they were all, I guess, pretty active, at least, like when they left home, right? And obviously most of you still are.
Yeah. So I went through a rebellious stage as a teenager, and I remember not wanting to get up to go to church on Sunday morning, not wanting to wake up early because I was wanting to sleep in from the night before, being out with friends. And Grandma, my mother, would say, if you can't get up and go to church, you can't go out with your friends on Saturday night. And I didn't like that, of course. And and my dad worked on the railroad, so he would be out of town, for days at a time. And so when he was home and this happened, I felt like my dad kind of took my side with my mom. And he was in the church by then. He came into the church when I was 15 and became active. But he would kind of defend me and say to my mom, this is a personal decision. And I think Michelle needs to decide for herself that she wants to go. But my mother felt very strongly about it. There was a lot of fear. I mean, for all the years that my dad wasn't active in the church, we had prayers every day that he would become active. So,
And, sorry, Mom, just
Yeah.
this maybe isn't that helpful to the podcast as a whole, but I'm just curious. So did Grandpa grow up going to church every day? And then how old was he when you were 15?
yeah, so great questions. So his father was from Pennsylvania and never joined the church during his lifetime, was very opposed to the church. So again, my father was raised in Wyoming, where he had pioneer ancestry there in that area early years. And his aunt had a hotel there that a lot of travelers coming to the West stayed. So the church was very dominant on his mother's side of the family, but his father never joined. So I don't know exactly if he was active growing up. I don't really know that. And then he was 55 when he became active. So I was 15. He's 40 years older than I am.
So then, did that change anything for you when you were 15 and he went and became active? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember feeling, like this celebratory type of feeling for all of us. And we all went to the temple together. For those who are aware of what the LDS temples are around the world, the religion teaches that we can be together forever as families. So that was a significant time. And my parents, even before Grandpa was active in the church, my parents were very strong believers of family togetherness, family love, family support, serving your family. So that was a significant time for sure. So then during my rebellious years, I was dating someone that was 3.5 years older than me. Just before I was 17, so at 16 in my junior year of high school, became pregnant. We got married. That was really, really hard for my parents. Of course, like any parents, you're disappointed. And, all the dreams they had for me, all the dreams they had for myself, or I had for myself, they felt like were going to be much more difficult now. And so consequently, I, made these choices, and I felt after that time that I needed to repent, to do better, to have a better standing in the church, in the religion before God. And so I worked really hard to do that. Your dad and I then went through the temple a year later. And during our marriage, there were times when your dad wasn't active, and those things were hard for me. But then ironically, after we were divorced, years after we were divorced, I left the religion. And so that between 2005 and 2007 is where I kind of went through this major faith crisis. That originated just from learning about some church history things that I really didn't know, really just human behavior that I didn't know about, that really rocked my world, and left the church for 14 years.
Do you remember the name of that book that you read?
Yeah, it's called Joseph Smith Rough Stone Rolling. It's written by a church member, Richard Bushman. He's a historian. He was a historian back east at a well-known school. So a lot of church members read that, and it didn't rock their world. But one reason he wrote it is because he said he would see so many college students come back east and go to college and learn all of these things about the history of some of the church leaders, and decisions they made, and it would rock their world. So he said one reason he wanted to write it is so people could become more educated. Even now, I've been reading a lot of stories about early church members. I mean, the church was founded in, the 1800s. And it's fascinating, actually, to learn more about the early church and these people. And I had never really done that before.
So you read this book, it kind of rocks your perception of maybe what you had thought it was, and so you 2005, 2007, you kind of depart over those 2 years. And then how long are you away?
Yeah, so for 14 years, I was out of the religion. So in 2021, I came back and was baptized back into the religion, but that also was a 2-year journey coming back. Similar to it took me a couple years to kind of gradually leave, and it also was a 2-year kind of gradually coming back, where I literally felt called. I would say I felt like a spiritual pull, like this magnet pulling me back. I would be in my car on Sunday with my German Shepherd driving up the canyon for our Sunday worship on our hike. And I'd pass a group of congregants coming out of a chapel, and I would literally feel this pull to join them. And I remember thinking, what is happening? Literally looking at my body going, I have not had this desire for 14 years. What is happening? But then there were little things which I would say over the 2 years that were pricking my heart and heart to be open to coming back. And one of the biggest pulls for me, honestly, was to come back to the community, to the structure of the people. During 2020, of course, as the world felt so chaotic during COVID, I really longed to come back to a group of people that were looking to do good together, to be in service of one another, to grow and learn together. I needed that. I felt very alone. And I kept literally hearing these words in my mind, you've got to get back to safety. And to me, coming back feels like safety. It feels like being in a community of caring people that we're all focused on doing good for each other, following Christ, learning to become better. It feels very supportive, where before I just felt like I was kind of out there on my own for years, which is what I wanted. I needed to experience that. And I think all in all, it's been a good experience.
Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I can imagine a lot of people can relate to that feeling of really wanting community, especially after 2020. So yeah, it's beautiful how that called out to you. However, I feel like just to kind of bring it back, for us as children, I think it was surprising, of course, right? Having you go back, because for so long you were not interested at all. And I think that it surprised you too, right?
Yeah. And if I can just say, during those 2 years, I didn't even tell anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you all until just before I was baptized.
Surprise! I'm Mormon again.
But let it be known to the audience how impressive that is, because Mom tells everything to everyone. And so the fact that she didn't, that is a miracle.
I'm pretty much an open book, but I felt like this was such a serious choice. And even in my mind, trying to understand intellectually what I was feeling in my heart, that it wasn't a decision I made lightly or impulsively, as leaving the church wasn't a decision I made lightly or impulsively. My spiritual growth, my spiritual nature, I feel like I've always had that all of my life, even in and out of the religion. But it's something I take seriously. And so, yeah, I didn't really want anyone's advice, is why I didn't tell anyone.
Yeah, I think that's fair to not want, others' opinions to influence whatever you were thinking. And I think probably because you knew we would be shocked also, and others would be maybe confused or like.
And others would say, oh, you should do it,
Yeah, others would be like, yes, finally, she's coming back. And then some people would be like, what? Like, doesn't make any sense,
And I did have people tell me afterwards, like, you have been so adamantly not wanting to be in the religion for so long, for 14 years. We don't know whether we can really believe this. Because to them, it did seem sudden. They hadn't seen, how I'd kind of been coming into it for a couple years.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a key too, is because like you didn't just like kind of leave and like not really talk about it. Like you were very vocal about, I mean, you are just a vocal person, right? So you were very expressive about some things you were upset with when you left, and very, I would say, pretty far on the other side of it, wouldn't you say? Like you were very, I don't know if I want to say against it, but kind of, it felt like that at least.
Yeah.
So then,
I would definitely say that. I mean, Josh, didn't you feel like I was against it?
Yeah, but I think part of that contention is just the dynamic of our relationship. Like, I don't think, as I recollect, I'm like, I guess my spectrum is like on the opposite end of it is that she's trying to gather everybody. Come on, let's burn these chapels down, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Which
she
I
wasn't,
didn't do. Yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't like recruiting others to say like. I mean, she was strong in her beliefs, and of course, like everybody that has strong beliefs, you want people to see why you believe it, and you want them to believe it. But I don't feel like she was like on a mission to convince everybody that it was wrong, right? She expressed her strong opinions, but it wasn't like she was, because a lot of people go through this faith crisis and then they go like anti-Mormon, and they publish articles and blogs, and it's like, this is everything that's wrong. But she didn't do that, to my knowledge. And
that's true. I didn't go on a podcast talking about it. I didn't go recruiting people, so that's true. But for people who knew me,
but it was more than,
for sure.
Yeah, but it was more than just, and I'm sure we'll get into this too, the various degrees and the way other members of our family left. I mean, people that I know, it's like a lot of people leave quietly, and I would say that you didn't do that. Like you didn't just, it wasn't like you slowly went inactive or anything. You made a decision, and that, to me, that is right with your personality, right? You're not a fence sitter. You made up your mind. I mean, you took time and you over a couple of years and decided, but once you decided, that was what you believed.
Yeah.
And I will say, from my perspective, I mean, I never felt like you were trying to convince me not to go to church anymore, but I did feel like subtle criticism, I guess, like just occasional things you would say, or like, hey, come on, Jared, just have a drink, or like you would, and you were joking, but it felt like you weren't joking,
Well, I think, I definitely felt that with Mom, and I think, people probably feel it from me, and as anybody with different beliefs talks to anybody else, like we probably all feel like that person has some element of like, I'm more enlightened than you. Like, like you're dumb. Like, I know better. Come with me. And I do feel like there was a little bit of that from Mom. Like, no, I know better now.
Yeah.
Which is okay. Like, because like I'm sure I come off that way to some people, like, oh, he just thinks he knows better. It's like, no, I don't.
Well, and that's the nature of religion too, right? It's you can't prove it, so it's what you believe in your heart, and you can't argue with it. And I'll add to that too by saying, I think me feeling that way for mom sometimes also comes from me being self-conscious about like for sure as I've gotten older, I do have a more esoteric view of the church than I used to.
And I also feel like it's important for people watching this to understand that the ages that my children were when I left. So, like Liz alluded to, Heather, Jared, and Josh. Well, I guess it was Jared saying that my older three sisters had all been raised with my dad not being in the church, which is interesting now. Like my older three children were all raised with me being in the church. So by the time I left, they were all grown. Jared and Josh had been on LDS missions. Heather was married. Ben and Liz were still at home, still growing up. And I know for Heather, her husband at the time, was very concerned that I would influence her. And he asked me at times to please not try to, influence her in that way. And I feel like also with my sons being returned missionaries, we had conversations about it. And I remember asking Josh when he got home in 2005, this was just a new thing for me to start. That's when I read this book, Joseph Smith, Rough Stone Rolling, and I actually went to a fireside in my stake where this author, Richard Bushman, spoke and answered all my questions. And I would have to say, I didn't talk to him personally, but he answered a lot of questions in the audience at the Q&A after the fireside. And I was just blown away that this guy talked at church about all these things that my brain couldn't wrap my understanding around, those things that I had never heard before. And so from that time, consequently, I shut out anybody who tried to explain it to me because I felt like I had been hoodwinked. So I was like, I'm not going to believe what anybody says. I have to figure this out on my own. And I remember Josh, being a newly returned missionary, had a friend who read the book that had been on a mission, Preston, and Josh saying, Preston, it's like, this is just church history, Mom, why is this affecting you this way? But I think even now reading church history, which is so fascinating to me, reading that church history that's so readily available that wasn't back then, actually the church leaders were concerned about some of the things that were happening or being taught as the church was growing so quickly that they couldn't, some of them were opinions and different things that they couldn't really put into, they couldn't control really, right? There was, and so with technology, of course, all the information's available. People can decide. And like Jared said, religion really is a personal experience, your own personal belief, what you feel in your heart, even a spiritual experience. So for all of you, I think it's important for you to talk about your experience. And of course, it was different for the three older children than the two younger.
Yeah, I think that's an important, thanks for clarifying that, of the three older were grown and out of the house, and then Ben and I were still in the home. So I feel like, obviously that impacted each of us differently. So we'll definitely get into that a little bit more. I also thought it was interesting you mentioning like, oh, I need to figure this out on my own. And like you just said, like it is such a personal experience, like religion is, or spirituality, or whatever it is that you believe. I think a lot of people are like that. Like, I need to like have this experience for myself. Like, I mean, I think that's beautiful to have that where, you're not just being told what to believe, you actually want to believe it, like and experience it in your own way. I guess there are people that maybe don't want that and just like religion for other reasons, right? Or they just like community or just want to be a part of something. But I think that's a beautiful way to go about it. I do
And
kind
if
of
I can interject right here too, Liz, where you just said that kind of how other people have different requirements to believe, you know? I
yes.
think for me, because I have to have the intellectual to match, I feel like I'm a very heart-centered person with emotion. I can be very emotionally driven, where some people might say, wow, she can be impulsive with her feelings. I can literally make decisions on the fly about my feelings or my intuition. However, I also have a strong intellect. And so those things for me have to, even if I might make an impulsive decision, and then I have to come back and, kind of study it through with my intellect. Whereas I've noticed other people in different faiths don't need to do that. Some people are just, sometimes I look at them and just think, wow, you just have so much faith. You just believe, and you're just this good hearted person who is faithful without having to have the intellectual, weighing all the things that need to make sense.
Right.
And I think I was that way as a youth. I think sometimes a lot of people raised in a religion will just kind of go with it because that feels good, like anything you're raised with.
Right. It's what you're comfortable with and just what you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's a good point. And I also want to clarify that I would say each one of us obviously have different relationships with the LDS religion and also different beliefs regarding this specific topic. I would say some of us are more aligned in certain ways than others. I would say we have very similar values that I think are kind of what makes this easier to talk about in some ways, because we also can understand, like, at the heart of it, we can align in a lot of ways. But we also, I think, would probably say we disagree in some ways too. And so I think my intention with having this conversation is to kind of go into that a little bit, because I do feel like I'm sure people listening can understand that religion can be a hard topic to talk about.
I think also we all have a general appreciation for spirituality, like it, and what I think what is really saying something. In fact, to me, that would be a big takeaway from this, is that, even though we are all have different beliefs, we all believe in the value of spirituality, and I think that's pretty remarkable, actually, because there's a lot of people that leave religion and just, I have friends from BYU that are atheists, and
we have other family members
and that's just a whole different
extended family
world.
that are atheists. Yeah.
And obviously there's atheists that are spiritual too. I should say that, but I think we all have spiritual practices of our own, like inside or outside of religion.
Yeah, I would say that is, thanks for pointing that out, that like we are each, I would say, very spiritual.
I think our other values, obviously we're doing this, so I think family is a value that we all share, relationships, beyond family as well. I think communication is something that we value.
Growth.
Yeah, I think we were instilled the value of hard work, maybe to a fault. Sometimes, at least I feel that some way. But yeah, I think common values for sure, how we were raised and just our experience.
Yeah, I met someone recently who they work with a lot of LDS people, and they were talking about how hardworking and like heart-centered they were, and like even though they just didn't know anything about the LDS religion before that, but they're like, if that's my impression of it, they're good people. So I do feel like that even kind of comes back to the religious aspect of it, of like certain values that instills in each one of us. Like because we each were born and raised LDS up until I was 12. So I was the youngest. I was 12 when mom decided to, I think, right? 2005. yeah, I would have been 12 when she started to maybe start questioning things. And so Heather, how old were you when that started?
I guess I would have been 25, 27. Like, yeah,
Okay.
during that
So,
time.
so what are you feeling right now? And how, if you could just kind of give a little summary of like your experience growing up, like how you felt growing up in the religion, if there's anything significant you'd like to share, like as far as your experience goes.
It is interesting I want to say the polarity of the like feelings I'm experiencing at the moment, because there's like so much gratitude, I think, for how like we were raised. Like most of my memories, I feel like going to church every Sunday and going to church activities during the week were very positive overall. I would say I didn't have many negative ones. Even considering, I feel like watching mom, I feel like she was always, or is, I should say, like speaks what's true for her. So I feel like often I remember her like going to the bishops and the bishops disagreeing with what she said, whether it was in a Relief Society, like some, women's meeting, or up on the pulpit, like in front of more people. It felt like she was always kind of just like challenging whether you call that the like status quo or like whatever, certain things that she just didn't agree with. And so I feel like there is like some beautiful aspects of community and service and just love that were like beautiful. So I'm really grateful for that. And also that mom was, I feel like, always curious. And so I don't know. I mean, I feel like all of you should remember this even before mom left. Well, maybe it was after. I'm trying to think. Well, no, I feel like it was before because it was in like the Valley View house. Like she would have different people who were doing Reiki or practicing NLP, like different forms of spirituality or energy work. She would have them come over and, she'd have a bunch of people come over and they'd teach a class. And so I feel like from a young age, I was always very curious too and asking questions. I just remember like even looking at the stars and being like, there's like so much more than like this, but like why am I here right now? And so I feel like, the church did a pretty good job of answering those questions for like a certain amount of time. And I also felt like one thing, and I feel like this is mostly myself, but also part of how mom was open-minded and learning other things, that like I could see at some point in my future that I probably wouldn't like remain in the church. But as long as it felt good, or like good most of the time, because nothing's going to feel good all the time, right? Relationships, jobs, all the things, like when it was like felt worse to like be there and to be listening to what was being taught and what I was being expected to teach my family, then like so that happened. I guess it probably started for me in like 2012, even though I always felt like even though I also did bear my testimony a lot, and that was fun, just holding the microphone.
Can you clarify what bearing your testimony means?
I just would bury a testimony like in the ground.
Bury?
Just basically speaking what was true for me. I feel like how the religion teaches it, I think there's a lot, there's a lot of different perspectives and how that influences those around us, but it's also like a bonding experience. I think whether it's in like summer camps or even like rehabs or, anytime when you gather together in a circle and you share your experience, it's like a bonding and a healing experience. So I feel like that was part of, how that tradition got started, which was like once a month and like what's called a sacrament meeting. So yeah, so it was about 2012 for me when I just started feeling like I don't feel like this is like there was a lot of things that happened for me as far as when I decided to leave. And also interesting, with my marriage and even watching, my husband at the time, like his experience with my mom at first, I remember him saying like, we need to pray for her. We really need to like pray for her. And I was like, we don't need to pray for her. I'm like, she seems good to me. She's, happy. She's enjoying life. So those are some of the things that like I have a hard time with, is that like this belief that it is a one and only true church. Treading on like, maybe some like spicy water here, but like that's something I don't feel like I ever believed as I got older. And I think that's what made it easier for me to transition out of it, was that like I just saw lots of people living their lives that were happy and like fulfilled, that didn't necessarily have to do it one way. And so for me, it was just like, for the most part, even though there's, change is always disruptive, leaving was good. Even though my bishop at the time, it was, there was a lot, and there's a lot of challenge. He has now also left, and he is very outspoken about it now.
That was in Tennessee, or?
Yeah.
So and Heather, thank you so much for what you said and all that you shared. I love that perspective of, just so many things that you said I could speak to. But one thing that I do want to share that you just alluded to is, what people's reaction is when you leave. And so for anyone watching this conversation, if you if you are a believer in your religion and you know someone who is thinking of leaving or is questioning the religion, what counsel I have to offer you from my perspective is, don't freak out. Don't go into fear. And it's okay to say, I want to pray for you. I think that's okay. But my experience was actually people that wanted to come in and control the situation were very fearful and saying to me, oh my goodness, what's happened? I can help you. Wait, like they could feel me falling away and they wanted to just like yank on the rope and pull me back. So for me personally, what would have been so wonderful, and I've been asked this so many times over the years, what counsel would you give me because my family member is kind of leaving or questioning? This is the word. Just tell them, I believe in you. I believe in your ability to figure it out. This is your experience. I love you, and I know you're going to figure it out. Even if it takes you decades, you're going to figure it out. And I feel like even recently, this experience I've had with my sister, caring for an older sister who's had a mental illness for many years, wanting to do certain things to fix the situation. What have I had come to my mind, which I believe is from the Spirit and inspiration? This is her experience. Very strongly, this is her experience. So I feel like that's a little bit of a hard thing also with religion that wants to come in and save each other and help each other, which is good. How do we figure that out when we also need to honor someone else's agency and experience and have confidence in their ability to do that for themselves? So I don't know how you would respond to that, Heather, with your experience. If you would say that same advice, or what would you say?
I think overall that's like great advice. I think praying for people is always good. As far as like the intentions, I feel like as far as like referring to like Dave and I, it was more about you coming back, you know, that you would like see the light, you know, and come back. Which for me to think that like we know what's best for anyone isn't like, I guess, isn't, doesn't feel loving or kind, even if we can, I think we often can see perhaps stumbling blocks, you know, of what certain choices are going to be, whether it's for our children or our friends or our partners. Like we can see those things, but like we still don't know what's best. You know, perhaps those mistakes and those like stumbling blocks will be the next like miracle or show them, you know, what they need to create more opportunity for them in the future. So as far as
So I like what you just said, because I know I did that with you in a hard time, where I definitely, there was judgment and fear around some decisions you were making, instead of just having confidence in your ability to figure it out, which I think feels a lot more empowering than judgmental or disempowering. So I'm sorry I was not able to do that at the time. And I also acknowledge, for people feeling that way about me, how going through that with you and some of my other children as well, worrying about them. It is hard when you're so connected and you love them and you want to prevent them from having anything painful. I think so many parents feel that way. I want to prevent the pain.
And yet, like, yeah, I feel like even, you know, our conversation, like prior to really starting this around emotions and certain things, like wanting to avoid them, like more and more, I'll honor Josh here in this, in my old age. I feel this like, oh, like everything is for my good. Like everything, even like the shittiest things, even the greatest things from this perspective I have right now, like it all like gets to be part of this experience, which is like, it is so much about contrast, you know, like the beauty and the pain, like when they come together and like meet sometimes in like the same experience, which I feel like sometimes I'm like, hey, I feel like I've had more of those experiences than like I've necessarily wanted to. You know, and I've like felt so good and so not good at the same time. And I feel like that's part of, I guess, whether we want to call it growth or evolution or just learning that like it isn't about like one experience. It's about like the full experience of just getting to create and co-create with each other. And
all the opposition. I mean, and as much as we might believe in agency and opposition, even as a religion, sometimes we have a hard time, you know, honoring it.
Even having this discussion, I'm realizing that we have, like, hearing, you know, what Heather says and then what you say, it's like, I feel like the underlying energy of certain beliefs is the same, but like the way you talk about it is different. And I also want to say, like, I think that's cool that I think talking about our values and like how we can talk about these things, I think that's another reason how, right? It's like there is this underlying energy, and maybe that's those values, right? That like we align with in certain ways. But yeah, it's like in some, like for me, the doctrine like doesn't do it for me. So I'm like, when you get specific about doctrine, I'm like, all right, come on. But like talking about like broad, general, like heart-centered things, like that really like speaks to me. And so it's just interesting because I know there are people that like, and maybe Mom, that's when it comes into like your brain wanting to understand it connected to that heart. I do feel like I'm more of the type of person that I'm like, just I I maybe don't need that part so much in a sense, and it doesn't fulfill me in maybe the same way as you, and it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just we're each different in our own experiences. And yeah, Heather, thank you so much for sharing. I was thinking while you were talking that I would go to your church.
Oh.
Well, just to echo what you're saying, it's like as Heather was talking in my head, I'm like, I believe all these exact same things, like just through a different architecture, I guess, like, and there might be some things that we differ on, like what we believe, but I really don't think there'd be much, right? I mean, the difference would be like that there's one path, and even that I would argue, yeah, but it's different, it's different because I don't believe that to have the fullest experience and to be saved, like there's one way, like, and I would argue that our church also does it as one that was probably, as devout as can be in this religion, in this group, is saying that, like, and I even think that we don't believe that, like, it's not a monopoly of truth and it's not a monopoly of good, like, I know that part of our belief is, yeah, like there is truth out there, and other people have lots of good things, and it can be, as Heather said, like the fiery waters, like, yeah, like that comment of like, this is the only true and living church. That is a hard statement.
We can't say necessarily what's right for another person, and I think we all believe similarly in that way. I think now, at least, maybe we went through phases where we didn't, but and I think that's another way that we can like honor each other in each of our beliefs, is because we don't necessarily think we know better. Maybe some of you do. I don't know. But that's the general consensus that I feel right now.
I would, and not as a religious topic, but I would like to push back on this idea of, we say we don't know what's best for other people. And while I think that's generally true, I would say that we probably agree that there are principles that people will be better if they live by them.
Like for me, I think that's the most important takeaway, is that, and I think that's where it gets tricky, trying to tell someone what's right or good for them. Like, yes, on a value based, I can see what you mean. Like, as far as, yeah, love is going to be good. And, but there's always nuance, as well. But I do feel like religion can be so beneficial for so many people, but I don't feel like it's necessarily essential for everyone either. You can have like a very fulfilled life in many different ways. And I think that's important to note here. Kind of want to keep continuing and talking about this, Jared. If anything else has stood out to you in this conversation and your general like feeling about religion.
Okay. Nervous. Yeah, I think when I thought about this topic, and I'm interested in hearing more of this from all of you, and I feel like I haven't heard this very much, and I guess it's just because it's the lens that I put it through, and I guess I haven't heard very many specifics about your relationship with religion as a child, compared to, and then throughout the rest of your life. I certainly have a complicated relationship with religion, and I, still call myself Mormon and go to church. So, yeah, growing up, I mean, I like the experience that I always share with people is that in Sunday school, when I was like 12 or 13, our teacher had us fill out like a, what do you call that? When you bury a box in the ground for 30 years or whatever, a time capsule.
The capsule.
So he had us like, basically it was this exercise where he'll write something to yourself in 30 years or like, where do you think you'll be in 30 years? And I wrote like that I wanted to be like a senior leader of the church, that I wanted to be like of the whole church. And the funny thing is that I remember not um not like thinking that that's what I wanted to be, but thinking that's what I was supposed to write. And to me, that's like the whole, like my whole relationship growing up, and the religion is like, it's really hard for me to separate what I wanted for myself and what like other people wanted for me, and the pressure that I put on myself because of that.
And how old were you at that time?
I was like 12 or 13.
When was the year? I was wondering, when was the year you got that Boy Scout award? What was that award?
I was in Roy, so I was like 11.
Okay. What was that award?
Youth of the Year. I was Youth of the Year of Weber County, Utah in 1993.
That's amazing. So I was going to say, maybe that's where that came from. You're like, if I'm Youth of the Year,
explain what this award is a little more, because I have not thought about this ever. And so I'm like, remind me what that Youth of the Year.
I mean, you remember that we had the plaque hanging on our wall, like in our shared bedroom, like
I don't remember it. I probably blacked it out. Like, no, I'm the favorite. This award doesn't exist.
It was just some like scouting competition. Like, I mean, it was like a beauty pageant for scouts, basically, like where and what I remember is it was just all interviews. Like I had I was nominated by like the local scout troop, right? So I was chosen by our church congregation scout leader, basically.
Probably Darrell Gentry.
Oh, yeah. Darrell. His wife always ate ice.
And then I went to like a county, like scouting commission interview, which it's kind of funny to think about because I wasn't nervous. The thing I remember is like being decked out, like just it felt like the army or something, having like my handkerchief around my neck tied just perfect in my scouting uniform with my, arrow of light on it and stuff,
And your hair perfectly.
Yes, perfectly
done. I can still picture the photograph of
down.
You. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's tied into other things too that we've talked about, right? Is like mom praised us boys a lot growing up, and I think that was great. And now, like, it's funny, for a long time, I, thought that it was just the church putting pressure on me, right? I feel like in my 30s, I resented that mostly. Like, oh, the church put so much pressure on me and made me feel guilty for being a human being. And now I'm realizing, like, oh, those are just pretty natural human things as well. Like, maybe it was, escalated because of that, but also like I put a lot of pressure on myself to be perfect, and that might have happened with or without a religion that was also focused on that. But yeah, like certainly growing up, I was like, I mean, mom kind of mentioned this, like I went along, like I every part of me, certainly like was wholeheartedly in the religion and trying to do a really good job at it. And when mom left the church, I knew that she was like reading the book and stuff, and that she was like kind of starting to have some doubts. And I think I was just so distracted, like, I mean, literally when I realized, like, I mean, do have a vivid memory of, getting married in the Salt Lake Temple and coming out of, well, not coming out of the temple, but in the temple, mom wasn't there. But but I knew she wasn't going to be. She told me she wasn't going to be. I didn't really think that much about it. But Paula, her sister, didn't know about it, and like in the temple after the ceremony, like came up just hugging me, crying, like just bawling, and I'm like, like my ego is like, oh wow, she's like so happy for us, like, and I didn't even connect it. Hey, Steve. And then once we like walked out, finally I realized like that she was like so devastated that my mom wasn't there, and so her reaction, her having that reaction to this decision that my mom had made, kind of made me realize the gravity of this. Just that was a big decision for you, but like I had just gotten married, and was looking forward to later that night when we would consummate our marriage. So I thought about it for a minute, and then so I feel like that never was on my radar that much. Like you were leaving. I mean, I do think we had like some really interesting discussions, because I feel like I had similar discussions with you, as sounds like maybe you and Josh had in relation to Preston, like. Because I at that time I didn't get through Rough Stone Along. It's a really long book, but I did start reading it and was like, oh yeah, like I learned about a lot of this stuff, on my mission, and it didn't really bother me. And then I feel like my relationship has evolved a lot with the church over time. I feel like I've never had like a really big faith crisis, but I feel like I've had lots of mini faith crises, where I'm just unsure about what I'm doing. And the thing that I keep coming back to, I think that has been referenced here, is that like what feels good. And for the most part, like going to church still feels good. And honestly, like some of it maybe is like I too am a contrarian, and I do get some satisfaction out of going to church and thinking some people are wrong. Like I get satisfaction for sure, like when people say things that I like. But yeah, I mean, it's always just like a continuing evolution for me. I think where I am now is that I think religion is a great community builder, and that's the part that I like for my kids. I like that it promotes certain values, and that especially here in Connecticut, where it's the Mormon Church has a much smaller presence. It's like, oh, this is our community, right? This is like a special thing where you get together, like, and you help each other, and it's different. Where, and honestly, that's part of the reason why we wanted to leave Utah, is because we kind of felt suffocated a little bit by the culture there. I am not inclined to do service, like that's one thing I like about going to church as well, is that it gives me opportunities to serve, because I definitely don't just naturally think of ways to serve others.
I appreciate your perspective. Josh, can we get like kind of a general idea on where you're at?
Yeah, mine. I think I could do mine pretty fast. I think I've generally had a great experience with religion. I love team sports. I love team, like organizations. Like I just do. Like I love that, and so I think religion works really well for me. I understand that it doesn't work for everybody. I would argue that like I think it is for everybody, but I understand that it doesn't work for everybody. And so for me, I feel like I have a great relationship with it. I enjoy it. I enjoy how it makes me feel. I enjoy the values it teaches me, how it teaches my kids. I've had my own, like, Jared said, like, your faith crises. Mine, I guess have never been faith. Mine have mostly been like existential crises. And and part of that, right, as I drive in my faithfulness in my religion, it's to try and quell that uneasiness about my existence eternally. And so like that drives my faith and my belief of, yes, I belong to a specific religion. I think I am undoubtedly Christian. And I like, that's where a lot of my belief is in Christ. And I can become distracted by other things that have happened within their, like, stuff that moms, you just, like, things just can distract you. Even like conversations like this, where it's like, oh, like, we can argue, we can nitpick this, we can nitpick that, and I can challenge you and you can challenge me there. But I always come back to, like, for me, there's a core belief of, does anything or everything I'm doing, saying, align with Jesus Christ as my savior, right? To be specific. And so, like, I can do a very good job of, like, tossing things out and, like, saying, this doesn't, like, I don't need to worry about this. I've got this one centered thing that I can think about. And it serves me, and that's a powerful thing that I learned a few years ago from a coworker. It wasn't religion, but I was talking about, like, just a belief he had about himself or about an idea. And I said, like, well, why, like, it could be this way. Why do you believe that way? And he simply said, like, well, that's the belief that serves me. And I was like, yeah, like, that makes sense. Why would I choose to waste my time believing something that doesn't serve me? And I think we all do that. And so, like, at this point, I'm kind of like, no, like, these beliefs serve me. And I believe they make me better. I believe they help me make others better. And so, yes, that's my experience.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think I mean, I love hearing all of your different perspectives, just because, like, I don't know if I've ever just asked you that, and so I enjoy hearing it. So thank you for sharing. Ben, I haven't heard from you this whole time, so I am excited to hear what you have to say.
Ben
Yeah.
has just beat his record on Candy Crush.
No, I want unfiltered, uninterrupted Ben.
Unfiltered.
20 minutes straight. Go.
This is interesting. What are you gonna say, Liz?
Oh, just what everyone else has been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I have more questions, like, just observing, like, honestly. So, excuse me, but this is definitely, like, great timing with my life, just not like religion, but kind of like everything, just even like what Josh just said about, like, beliefs or, like, what we choose. It's just wild to think, like, how this goes into absolutely every fiber of our existence, and I appreciate all of you sharing. But for as far as myself, as, like, I guess, like, what I believe, so I was definitely very devout up until Mom left, and it's interesting to hear everyone's perspective. Like, it definitely affected me when Mom left, and that's gotten me I haven't thought about this exactly, about, like, oh, like, even Mom, potentially, like, mine and yours, like, our relationship. Like, I didn't even think about, like, oh, this might be, like, what I may view as, like, a betrayal or something, where it's just like, it was my truth. Like, it was everything to me. And so it was interesting, like, what you probably felt, I probably felt from you, like, it was like the ripple effect, which is fascinating to think about. And I think, like, it was scary.
So you would have been 14?
I was 14 or 15. And so what happened, right, is, like, we moved away from that neighborhood that, like, just, nurtured us. And, like, for me, that was just, like, such a support system. And so when we moved away from that, that kind of, like, was a window for me to, like, not believe it. But I still went back to that church for a while. Like, I remember driving specifically over to that church. And so it was very strange. It was unsettling. Like, so it's got me thinking to go back to that moment and just be like, oh, like, what did that actually, like, what impact did that have on me? Because honestly, I've kind of just, like put it away. Like, even in that time, like, there was other different influences, right? Like, I was getting into music. The girlfriend I had at the time, she wasn't Mormon or LDS. So, like, I had different influences, and then plus Mom, and then we moved. And so it was just like a really convenient time. And then when we lived with mom's sister Paula, like that church war just wasn't my vibe. Like it wasn't the same. Like honestly, it wasn't as cool. It wasn't as like, I don't know what it was exactly. It wasn't what I was familiar with by any means. And so like that was one of the ways I was just like, this isn't for me. And I remember that bishop pressuring me to go on a mission and like guilt tripping me. And I was like, bro, this isn't, nah. Like this is not how I want to do it. And so, and
Dang
then
that guy,
I'm,
dang him.
so it's like in that, so it was like a bunch of things combined for me, like different motivators. And then at that time, music, that's what I told myself the story. Like, not to just be like, not to really face my own truth of like, what do I believe? But going back to the belief that serves me, I was like, I'm going to stay home and I'm going to make it big in music. By the time everyone gets back, I'm going to be a huge rap star. And then like, it'll be worth it that I didn't go on a mission, you know, like, and so it's interesting to even go back to
So
that. Like I
cute.
didn't really get like I did choose, but it wasn't really like what I was like choosing deeply in a way. So it's interesting to reflect on that. Yeah, like definitely new age, definitely like went into that quite a bit. I wouldn't like I'm definitely I wouldn't place any label on me in this moment. Like I'm even like some things that I see from that quote unquote new age world repulse me now. So it's like, I think for me, um, it's, yeah, I'm in the place of just like I don't know. And it's like being okay with not knowing of like, but even just like what I've been doing, one thing recently of just like, I've been watching a few YouTube videos from this Bible historian. Have you guys heard of him? Wes Huff. He was on Joe Rogan. And so just like a pure historical view, of course, there's always some type of bias, but it was just like fascinating to like hear like that side of it. Like, so like I'm always open and curious to like learning about things in that perspective. Um, and I've seen even like in Austin where I live, like when I moved here, there was definitely like a new agey thing happening, and there still is that, of course. But now I've seen like a resurgence of Christianity being more popular, which is just interesting to watch. And so it's just like, like why is that happening? And so like I guess what you could say is just like I'm an observer and I am hesitant to pick like this is it or something like that because I've just seen in my own life whenever I do that I change my mind, which is okay. Obviously like I'm expanding and keeping an open mind. But I think like even like what we've been talking about goes even back to my work as like a whatever you want to call it, right? A coach, a speaker, a thought leader, a writer is like that's one thing that I can feel is like revisiting myself right now of just like kind of yeah, putting out this absolute truth of potentially what I think is right for everyone. Like kind of what Jared said. And so just even thinking about like, like am I doing the exact thing that I didn't want to be doing? Like I know that's not fully entirely true, but it's just like an interesting way, just like a thought reflection exercise to be like, and this is why I say it's like really good timing for me in my life of just like, how did this like impact me in more ways than I could even imagine? And going back to like the perfectionism thing is like, for sure, like absolutely, like I was terrified of doing the wrong thing. Like terrified of like if I didn't do this thing, I was literally going to be punished by God. And so I know, and then that goes, of course, relationship to mom, to authority, to God itself, you know. And so it's like you can go pretty deep with it. Maybe that's more than what we what we wanted, but like so it's just in a space of like observation and learning. But overall, if you could wrap it up of like it's cool to be in a spot where it's just like I can fully like And I feel like I've always been like this too, like full acceptance of what others want to believe, because I want others to believe it. And I can totally see why they do. And so like like when anyone's speaking about any type of thing they might believe, I'm not like, I definitely still like, I can try and critique it in my mind or something like that, but I'm like, yeah, like kind of what Josh said, if that serves you, like go ahead and do it, please, like do it. So I wouldn't say I have like a strong religion spirituality view, but maybe that'll change in a year or two, who knows.
Yeah, interesting. I feel like I just learned so much about you.
Really? Why?
I just haven't heard you say any of that before, so
Oh,
interesting.
but I think it all the time, so I think everyone knows what I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, this is why I've been loving this podcast so much, is I'm like, we do talk about this stuff, but there is something very beautiful about being intentional with it and like talking to and just sitting and listening to each one of you talk about this in general. It's like, because it's, you know, in a normal everyday conversation, it's easy to just get pulled in different directions. You don't really like stay on this topic for an extended period of time. And yeah, I'm just really grateful for all of you and for sharing, because I feel like it's even maybe shifted the way that I'll think of it in the future and in the ways that I, you know, will, yeah, I just feel more contemplative now about it rather than just like, well, yeah, I know where everyone stands. Okay, thanks, guys.
That's so beautiful, Liz, because that was actually my response to what Ben just said. Like, I just learned a lot. And
Yeah.
I think it's sad that I just assume that I know. And so I think this is a wonderful experience for us as a reminder, and others, like you said, Liz, to have intentional conversations where we actually ask the questions and then listen.
Yeah, I think,
I agree.
I mean, this is kind of a great place. I mean, I was maybe wanting to go into some other things, but I think they could just.
Well, Liz, you gotta
Yeah.
share your perspective.
I mean, it's interesting because like even hearing Ben say like it was his truth, and then to like have, for some reason, I don't know why that makes me cry. But yeah, just when you were talking about that, I'm like, wow, like that would have been like so impactful to have that be like such a solid truth, and then to just like, whew, you know, I didn't have that experience with it, so I think it just kind of hit me like, whoa. I had, yeah, made, like Mom said, it's like so nice to just not assume that you know certain things, because I feel like I've learned something about each of you. And with my own experience, like I kind of felt the opposite. I never really felt aligned with religion or the organizational aspect of it. Like I think I liked the community, I liked my friends. I like exactly what Heather said too. I loved, like, testimony meeting was my favorite. Like that was the one that I actually enjoyed going to, the only one that I actually enjoyed going to, because it was this like circle of sharing and like sharing from the heart and having these beautiful experiences, and kind of like this, right? I'm like, I love this, where it's like you're literally just, I'm like, wow, I do really love this. But yeah, just this intentional sharing, and usually they were sharing some type of message or inspiration that they had, and yeah, it was a lot of times religious and sometimes not, and sometimes funny, and it just felt like so real to me. And I think some of the doctrine and the like, you have to do it this way and you have to do it this way, was very like, felt very icky to me from the beginning. Like I'm like, I mean, I know this story has gotten mentioned pretty much every episode, but of me like escaping the crib and going out to the woods. But I'm like, that's a perfect example of like, I just want to be free and I want to explore and I want like realness and real experiences. And that's like top of my values, is like the heart and the like quality, intentional exploration of humans and experiences in life. And I feel like feeling the doctrine of religious just felt very like I shoved down to me. It just felt like not expansive. Not that that's even how I thought of it. It was more just I didn't like going. I didn't like going. I didn't like having to do something that I didn't really want to do, and I didn't feel like it lit me up in the same way that it sounds like it did for you guys. And I also think a large part of that too was like I feel like a lot of you maybe had mentors in the church as well, and I don't think that I did. I like never felt like there was an adult there that was like that I felt that I looked up to or anything. And so yeah, I just never felt attached to it. Our parents were divorced, so we would go to my dad's every other weekend, and often at that time like he wasn't going, and I remember like being like, yes, I don't have to go to church. Like that was like the thing I looked forward to. And so the transition for Ben and I think was very different when mom left. For me it was like, oh yeah, this is great. It felt like normal to me. It just felt like a continuation of like, well yeah, I didn't really feel attached to it. I didn't really want to go anyways. So now I just like don't feel as much pressure to go. However, I do want to say that like I mean, mom never really like pressured us necessarily. I think I just put that on myself because I think a huge part, and I think this is a good way to tie this together, is a lot of these conversations have kind of come back to like value and worth, which is like huge when it comes to religion. And I think that like mom, looking back, often like valued, and she like these stories have been mentioned, they valued like if you were doing well in the eyes of religion, or like, you know, reading your scriptures every day and like doing the right things as far as like under the umbrella of religion, like there was more value, it seemed. Like Ben was going to be like this religious leader, and therefore he was like on a pedestal. Whereas so I'm like, oh, maybe I internalized it more than I even thought, and that there was this like feeling of, and there was truth to it because I'm emotional. But like, gosh darn it, I thought I wouldn't cry on this one. But yeah, just that like maybe that's where the like what's the point in trying kind of comes up for me, that I've talked about in a past episode, where it's like, oh, like Ben is already up here, like he's got that role, like I don't really need to, I don't feel identified to this religion anyways. But it's just interesting to me how value and religion and kind of like feeling worthy of something, like I don't think I ever felt worthy enough to be there. Like I never really felt like I fit in anyways. And I didn't think I even felt anything about that, to be honest. But yeah, it just felt like perfection was required to be a part of it and to be fully accepted. And I was not willing to be a participant in that because I'm like, that does not feel good to me because we are human and we are imperfect. And this does not feel like an obtainable thing. So like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life feeling like I'm not good enough. And I constantly am like, not perfect and I have to be better.
Thanks for sharing, Liz.
Yeah.
And like you definitely uncovered something there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, I did.
That sucks.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense though, right? Is like that. I mean, that's in our own different ways, right? Of like that's being worthy to enter the kingdom of heaven, right? Or whatever we want to say, like that. It's ingrained, and so, and even in that show I mentioned, is like we are the chosen people, and so that fact of being chosen, it sounds like you potentially didn't feel again,
Yeah.
chosen or worthy or whatever you want to say.
And I
No,
think-
it's
Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just going to come back to this idea of like, you know, like how individual our journeys are, you know, because that's obviously something that you've got to work through and work on, you know, and like Ben has that, and I think I have that too, just not religiously. I was actually even thinking about this week, like, as I was reading some stuff of like, you know what, like I've never struggled with like the weight of my sins. You know, I've never worried about being perfect. Like I just feel like, no, like it makes entire sense to me that I'm imperfect and that if this is real, God will forgive me and it doesn't matter. So like I don't need to waste time. Anyways, but like, you know, it's interesting to hear your perspective, and we'll kind of try as we're all going through this of saying, oh, we just got to all work through our own individual stuff. And we all have things that we're working on. And I also feel like Ben, like I need to say this to you. Because I think it's probably more about me than it is about you. But like hearing that story that Liz said of like, man, like you never put that perspective. I mean, I was 22, 23, and like, yeah, you know, like you don't at that age. I mean, teenage, even through your 20s, like you don't really think much about anybody else. As a man, from my experience. But hearing you say like, yeah, like it was your truth. You moved. You're like all these things are just like earth shattering, you know. And like, man, like dang it, like I wish I had the foresight then to be able to like, hey man, like sorry you're going through all this. And then what makes me I think cry is that you went to music to like feel that void is what I'm perceiving. And then I remember talking to you about music, and I think, you know, I don't know if you felt this way, but my recollection of the memory is like that I think I like discouraged your music, you know, just saying like, dude, like this isn't gonna go anywhere. Like, what are you doing? You know, where I think my role should have been like, hey, like this is awesome that you're invested in something. And I love that you love it, and I want you to succeed. And so, you know, maybe it's more about the guilt that I have from it, but I just wanted to say, yeah, I'm sorry if you remember it that way. Like that's how I felt about it, and I'm sorry for not encouraging you more in a time when you probably needed that encouragement.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, it's maybe yeah, similar to like what Liz said is like, oh damn, like yeah, I didn't realize. I remember like honestly, I haven't gone to therapy in a while, but I'm gonna start coming back because it's like I realize it's just funny like all these things are bringing back up, like, and Mom and I had a conversation yesterday that was we can talk about separately, but that was definitely emotional about her and I, and like even that was perfectly timed, like with this of just like, yeah, that was a lot, and to own that, and it's like, and I was afraid to own that because I felt like I had to like hold it all together. Which perfectly makes sense to like how I feel right now. So yeah, I didn't expect this coming. Woo. Mom, is it okay if I bring in something to what we talked about yesterday? So one of the things that Mom said to me was like, I don't feel seen by you. Which honestly makes me really angry. Because I'm like, I don't feel seen. I'm a freaking kid. It's like, it's not my job. And I'm like, it feels like I don't want to do that anymore. And so it just makes sense to honestly like to how I feel about my job right now is like I've been doing kind of like what Heather was saying, like I've been doing all these things for other people and not myself. And so it's like it feels like and I also told mom that it feels like I'm going back like when a caterpillar goes into the cocoon, it like dissolves into goo. You know, it's called the goo phase. Like a lot of people just think about the caterpillar or the butterfly and like this beautiful transformation. It's like, no, bro, like you dissolve, you turn into goo. And that's what it feels like to me. Is like like questioning everything again. I'm like, why am I even doing this? And so and like I know it's for my good, like what Heather said. And it's like I have that perspective, but it's still like uncomfortable and painful. But yeah, even just this conversation and this release, it's just I laugh at it because I remember when I was. Am I still here?
Yeah,
Okay.
you froze for a minute, but you're back.
Okay, but yeah, like when I recorded my course, that's called Fear Alchemy. I literally had the same thing happen, like this same. It's just funny, like that was what 2021, so 4 years ago, exactly, actually, which is weird to me. Um, so it's something again that yeah, that I gotta work through. Of like the thing that came up, like I felt so much pressure to get it perfect, and I was talking about the fear of abandonment. Um, and it was like, yeah, if I don't get this perfect, like if I don't deliver, if I don't literally save people, if not everyone who takes this course has some profound breakthrough, then essentially I've failed and love will be taken away. And so it's interesting that like that's basically what it has felt like. It feels like yeah, in a way that like I guess no one was there for me, which I know is not entirely true. I know that, but that's like the painful part that so thanks for holding space for this moment. I had no idea that this was going to go here. And thanks, Josh, for
Well, that makes
following
sense. I
your.
mean, I think if it's okay, Ben, I mean, I think we
Yeah.
can stay on that for a minute because I mean that, like, I mean, what everybody's saying is like, I mean, I felt that same thing when
Yeah.
we kind of brushed by that. Like, I didn't want to call too much attention, but yeah, I mean, that's just, I mean, it's brutal to hear you say that this thing that meant so much in your life that it kind of like you just didn't have access to it in this same way anymore, you know, especially like at that age with your like emotional resources, like to yeah, to this thing that's kind of giving you so much too, like yes, it's maybe taking too, but it's giving you a lot, and then for it to all of a sudden be gone along with I mean so many things. I mean mom mentioned that,
Yeah.
well, in our pre was this in our pre conversation, you know, about your the hard time you had when you guys lived on that house by Skyline. I mean, that's kind of like all around the same time.
All at the same time. Yeah.
And I do feel like you had such a great support system in that neighborhood too.
For sure.
Yeah. And I feel like I mean, I just do want to call out all of you because I just saw this little miracle thing about being here for each other and how there's really power in numbers because Ben and I didn't necessarily resolve this on our phone call yesterday. And I've talked to Liz about this. When she said that she's had some of this forward progress because of these calls. And I really do feel like it's because when we're together, it's a different experience than just when we're one-on-one. Even for you to talk to me, I think is easier when all of you are together and you need to talk about hard things. I think it must feel safer than just telling me things one-on-one. But I just love how this can happen, you know, with all of us together in numbers. because it makes me feel like it's not just all on me, right? And I hope Ben feels like it's not just all on him or on one person to make it work or fix it. As you were all talking, I really feel that probably, Ben, when you said you felt betrayed by me when I left the religion, I would think that probably all of the siblings felt like that except Liz.
Well, because you felt that. You said hoodwinked, but deceived or betrayed, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't feel that.
You didn't
Mm.
feel like I betrayed you when I left?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I mentioned that, like, I think I was distracted, you know, like, I mean, kind of like, I mean, what Josh said about Ben, I mean, I kind of felt the same way. Like, I wish I remember
You
having
were just newly married, right? So
I mean, I remember having the conversation with Tessa, like, I think it's great that Ben, like, is still going to church. I hope he goes on a mission, you know? And I mean, I wish I would have told him that, you know?
or just reached out to him, right? As brothers to say, how you doing, man? You know.
Yeah.
So Josh, you did feel like you were betrayed, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, betrayal is a strong word. I don't know if, like, that's how strong, but like, I guess, like, kind of thing, like, I felt hoodwinked. Just like, hey, like, you raised us this way. Like, who are you to have your own thoughts and opinions and change and evolution? But
betrayal,
no, I think
betrayal feels on purpose, which obviously it's not like you planned that.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
hoodwinked.
Yeah.
Maybe
Thank you.
somewhere
Yeah.
in the middle of hoodwinked is like, yeah, like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, I think we touched on a lot here. I think to wrap it up, like, to anyone who, potentially has listened to this whole thing, who knows? I think the biggest takeaway for me is, like, if you can, like, have these conversations. And, I think what's hard is some people truly can't, whether, like, family members are no longer there or you're just not open to it. So I think that can be kind of a tricky piece of advice too, because it's like, not everyone has the luxury to be able to sit down with their family like this and have these conversations. So I'm also recognizing, like, the really privilege that we each have to be able to do that. I want to honor that we are doing this and how beautiful it is. But I think even maybe not even with your family, but, like, just loved ones, just, like, having those conversations is so important. And to be intentional conversations. I think that's, like, the biggest takeaway I can bring from this. And, we just had a 2-hour conversation about religion, and we're maybe more in love with each other now than we were when we started.
Yeah.